What's up, Wizards? It's Dev. Duskmourn preview season finale video. Basically, big extravaganza, big summer blowout. We have already, in fact, done the speedrun set review, which does contain some of the cards we're going to look at today, but I wasn't able to get to like 8 of the cards from today in yesterday's speedrun because they hadn't released them yet. So with that said, there are some brand new things, and even if you've already seen the speedrun, there are going to be cards in this video that you haven't seen me talk about yet. But that said, Bedhead Beastie here, you have heard me talk about if you've seen the speedrun. This is 6 mana, 4 and 2 red for a 5/6 beast with Menace and Mountain Cycling 2. So this is the last in the cycle of the common land cycling guys that we got to see in this set. Again, these are all like decent limited. I give all of these a 4 basically, so slightly below average, but still somewhat limited playable on occasion. I think this guy definitely fits the bill. But with that in mind, I want to point out before I keep moving in between cards here that today is not really going to be in any particular order save for the very last card, which I do believe is the absolute best card of the day, and in a lot of ways one of the best cards in the entire set, if not the best card in the set. But we'll get there in due time. Let's take a quick trip through some cards that you may or may not have seen, and some of them you definitely haven't. So we'll move on to Cracked Skull, though. This is 3 mana, 2 and a black for an aura that enchants a creature. When it enters, look at a player's hand. You can choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. So that's just coercion. That's just the card coercion on an aura. When enchanted creature is dealt damage, destroy it. I think it's not great. I think it's not that good, to be honest. So I'll go ahead and move on to Dazzling Theater and Prop Room here. Now, Dazzling Theater is 4 mana. I hadn't seen this card before this morning. 3 and a white for an enchantment. Creature spells you cast have Convoke. Cool. Prop Room over here is 3 mana, 2 and a white. Untap each creature you control during each other player's untap step. That is a pretty powerful looking effect, giving all of your dudes a basically vigilance in a way, but also the ability to tap down for activated abilities more than once in a turn cycle, and obviously letting like mana dorks do their thing on your opponent's turn, and maybe even block on your opponent's turn while still making mana on yours. Prop Room is a pretty sweet little card, all things considered, but Dazzling Theater isn't bad either, obviously. Now, one cool thing about Dazzling Theater is you can play it for 4 mana, and it feels like you're skipping your turn 4, but if you have enough creatures out, you can then convoke a spell from your hand, a creature from your hand, by tapping your guys down. So this doesn't necessarily just end your turn 4 the moment that you play it, which I kind of like. If you're in the kind of deck that wants a card like this, then you'll probably have like a few creatures out by the time you run this thing onto the table to where you can actually cast another spell. So I kind of don't hate this, but I do struggle to see where exactly it's going to fit, honestly. But I'll move on to a room that I do really like. This is Defiled Crypt and Cadaver Lab. Crypt is 4 mana, 3 and a black for an enchantment. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, create a 2/2 black horror enchantment creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. Boo! Cadaver Lab is a black mana. Whenever you unlock this door, return a creature card from your yard to your hand. Now, I think that my pattern recognition skills could be better than this, honestly, because it's the last day of previews, and I think I'm realizing that the reason why sometimes the more expensive one is not always on the right is because this is the order they want you to do the things in, because that's how you get the most value. You know, if you play Defiled Crypt and then unlock Cadaver Lab on the same turn, you could easily do that. Then you get a 2/2, like a free 2/2 if you use the Raise Dead effect. And it is a raised dead effect on an enchantment, and I think that there are multiple reasons why you might like to have it on an enchantment. You can then sacrifice it after it's already gotten you the value for other value. You can blink it, or maybe even return it to your hand with a Nurturing Pixie and then play Cadaver Lab again. So a raised dead that you can cast over and over, or blink, or whatever, is actually very cool when you get down to it. Also interesting that Defiled Crypt, which is kind of a very weak Insidious Roots in some ways, right? But when you get down to it, it's still a fine magic card, you know? Obviously, it synergizes with the right half of itself, so that's kind of neat. But, you know, even if it only happens once per turn, it's entirely possible that you get a relatively steady stream of 2/2s. And if you have any way of, like, removing creatures from your own yard during your opponent's turn, there's plenty of ways of doing it. Then you get 2/2s during their turn too. So could be actually okay. I like that both halves of this are almost playable. You know, when you have a split card like that, it sometimes means that it is playable because that versatility is really important. And I do like that if you just play Cadaver Lab early in the game to get back a cheap creature, Deep Cavern Bat, Tiny Bone, something like that, you've got Defiled Crypt just kind of sitting there. You know, in the late game, it can really create, like, you know, 6 power worth of stats for you. you know, with some work, but not that much. I do think this is a pretty neat card here, but we'll see if it sees play. If it sees play anywhere, I'm going to assume it is in Pixie, because I think the card is actually halfway decent there. But we'll move on to another room here. This is Derelict Attic and Widow's Walk. I'm still feeling the effects of the speed run yesterday where I talked for like 5 hours straight, and like halfway through it, you start, fumbling your words. Blood pressure and adrenaline are working at odds in your own system. Derelict Attic is 3 mana, 2 and a black for an enchantment. When you unlock this door, draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. Widow's Walk is 4 mana. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets +1/+0 and gains Death Touch till end of turn. So a weird little like exalted effect, I guess, on Widow's Walk. It costs an awful lot of mana. I would much rather, very often at least, have Death Touch in a defensive capacity than an offensive capacity. But still, +1/+0 for an attacking creature is like okay in and of itself, and obviously the Death Touch will make sure that it gets through. So if you have a combat damage trigger, if you have a creature with survival or something like that, then obviously there are reasons why Widow's Walk might be good. But 4 mana is a bit much. Just kind of is. As far as Derelict Attic goes, it's kind of almost Read the Bones, but Read the Bones lets you scry. This is just draw 2, lose 2, which isn't like completely unplayable. And, just like I said on the last card, sometimes 2 effects that cost more than you really want to pay for them, stapled together, will like actually be playable. I don't know if that's the case with this card. I'm just not too sure, man. But we'll move on to Don't Make a Sound. 2 mana, 1 and a blue for an instant. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. What's the upside? If they do, surveil 2. We've been seeing a lot of these lately. He's like 2 mana, counter it unless they pay specifically 2 mana. They'll never just give us mana leak. Instead, they'll give us like some sort of value beyond the 2 mana thing, but they will never just reprint mana leak, apparently. Surveil 2 is pretty good, but I think I'd probably rather play Phantom Interference a lot of the time. That said, if you're in a deck that's trying to put cards in its yard for a multitude of reasons, right? Like, again, I've already mentioned Solar Flare a few times this season, a sort of Reanimator control hybrid list. Might actually be really interested in this, right? Counter your spell on an early turn and fuel my graveyard. Okay, that's a pretty good Magic card. It's hard to deny. Next is, and honestly, just fixing your next draw on a counterspell is probably very, very good too. So let's not, downplay how good that is. Meat Locker is up next, along with Drowned Diner. Meat Locker, not the Gentleman's Club, but a Magic card. This is 3 mana, 2 and a blue for an enchantment. When you unlock this door, tap up to 1 target creature and put 2 stun counters on it. Drowned Diner over here is 5 mana, 3 and 2 blue. When you unlock it, draw 3 and then discard a card. Just kind of normal. Kind of a normal card, Not the best removal in the world. Not the best card draw effect in the world, especially at sorcery speed. But if you find the breathing room to unlock it, drawing 3 is pretty good. So I could be undervaluing this, but I'm just not sure that it's quite where it needs to be. But again, draw 3. Next, though, is Moldering Gem and Weight Room. I have also reviewed this card, along with a couple of the other ones we've talked about. Moldering Gem is 3 mana, 2 and a green for an enchantment. When you unlock this door, search your library for a basic, put it on the battlefield, tap, shuffle up. Weight Room is 6 mana, 5 and a green. When you unlock this door, manifest Dread. Put 3 +1/+1 counters on that guy. So, you guys remember Dance of the Tumbleweeds? I wouldn't put it past you if you don't. It was a card from OTJ that basically said, if you pay a total of 3 mana, do Moldering Gem. We see a lot of these, like 3 mana, go get a basic, put it on the table with some form of upside. In this case, the upside is that it's got another card attached to it. In the case of Dance of the Tumbleweeds, it's that the other mode you could choose, or you could pay enough mana to do both modes, was that you get an XX token, and X equals the number of lands you control. Well, often I found that I didn't want to wait to pay the full mana cost, because I've tried that card out in ramp decks. I didn't want to pay the full mana cost to get the creature and ramp. Very often I just want to ramp on turn 3, and that's about it. Later on in the game, if you draw a Dance, then maybe you can make like a 7/7. But it just didn't really work out that way a lot of the time. This, on the other hand, doesn't really force you to choose. You do have to pay a bunch of mana, but at least in this case, you can pay it in installments. They don't want the whole 5 or 6 mana up front for a card like Dance. When it comes to this, though, you go ahead and pay the 3 on your turn 3, and you get the effect you're looking for. You go get that basic, and then later on in the game, if you have mana, if you draw dead, if your opponent's already blasted through all your 6 and 7 drops you'll be ramped into, well, then Right Room's there for you. You get a 5/5, and you throw a card in your yard, and maybe you put a good creature down you're a ramp deck, so you can afford to turn that creature up next turn, no matter how big it is, and then put three. It has 3+1/+1 counters in that case. So you have a 10/10 Atraxa, right? Like a 9/9 Vaultborn Tyrant or something. Like, I don't know. I could see it working out, but I just think there are probably better ways at 3 mana to ramp in Standard. You know, we got Overlord of the Hauntwoods in this set, which I think is like the best way to ramp in Standard for 3 mana. But there's also Heaped Harvest. People have been playing that and having pretty good, success rate with it lately. So I don't know if this takes the spot of 3 mana ramp in Standard, but it is a pretty decent card. It really is. Monstrous Emergence up next. 2 mana, 1 and a green for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast it, choose a creature card you control or reveal a card from your hand. So choose a creature you control or reveal a creature card from your hand. Sorry, the mic was in my way. Monstrous Immersion deals damage equal to the power of the creature you chose or the card you revealed to target creature. So it's kind of neat because you get a bite effect that doesn't require you to actually have a creature on the table and actually rewards you, not being able to play your 7-drop bombs yet. Like, do you have a Vaultborn Tyrant in your hand? Well, now you can deal 6 to a guy, sorcery speed, but I don't know. I like it more than some green removal spells because often you get screwed by the fact that, either they control the board state where you can't cast your Prey Upon or your bite effect or whatever, or when you do cast your bite effect, they just remove your guy and fizzle your bite spell. And that feels really bad. But in this case, what are they going to instant speed make you discard that guy? I mean, maybe there's some sort of convoluted way to do it, but for the most part, yeah, you're giving away information. Big deal. You get to blow away their amazing 3-drop. And maybe they know you have a Vaultborn Tyrant, but what are they going to do about it? So I don't know. I actually think this is pretty good green removal right here that especially aids ramp decks with huge dudes. So kind of like it. Possessed Goat is up next. This is a white mana for a 1/1 Goat. You can pay 3 and discard a card to put 3+1/+1 counters on Goat, and it becomes a black demon in addition to its other types. Activate only once. So it's pretty bad. It's fairly bad. It's not anywhere near as good as Concealing Curtains or whatever it was called that just rotated out. We all love that card, but this ain't good. I would say your opponent can even just blow you out when you try to actually use the ability, and it requires you to discard a card too. You discard a card, you pay your entire turn or most of your turn at least to make this a 4/4, and your opponent's just wonk, cut down, you suck. Go home. I don't know. It's a silly little card, but it does give you a demon, and some things in Limited care about that. Discarding a card is kind of important in the Limited environment too because of, reanimation and delirium and blah, blah, blah. So, maybe, but I really doubt it. I think that you're just really trying to feel really bad. If you end up putting this in your deck, I think you're attempting consciously, actively to feel bad. So I just wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. And I like 1-drops that become large. I like that, but again, you're asking for it here, man. You really are. So I just wouldn't do it. I think this is one of the worst cards in the set. I really do. But next is another room. There's a lot of them today. Roaring Furnace and Steaming Sauna. Now, Furnace is 2 mana, 1 and a red for an enchantment. When you unlock it, it deals damage equal to the number of cards in your hand to target creature an opponent controls. Steaming Sauna, on the other hand, is 5 mana, 3 and 2 blue. You have no maximum hand size. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card. It's pretty good. It's actually okay. It's a serviceable removal spell on 1/2 that can take down creatures larger than red-blue is normally able to take down. We've seen a couple of cards like this see pretty sparing play in decks from time to time over the last couple of years of Standard. But is it often has a card like this where, on the one hand, it's effectively this same text box on Roaring Furnace. And again, sometimes they'll pop up. So I could see this being a thing, especially considering if you do get down Steaming Sauna first, then obviously you don't have maximum hand size. You're drawing a bunch of cards, so maybe you can deal 10 to a creature with Roaring Furnace. But, I think most of the time on turn 2 or turn 3, Roaring Furnace is going to take down whatever you want to take down. And even in the relative late game or the mid game, this can kill a Sheldred more than most red spells have any chance of doing that, right? But, after you've played your removal spell, then your opponent has to stare this thing down for the rest of the game, knowing that if you ever have a free turn, you're just going to help draw them for the rest of the game. There's nothing to do about it. I mean, they can always disenchant this or break it somehow. But and with all of these, it's just like the Goat that we just looked at. With all of these, you have to worry about getting blown out. On your turn, I'm going to pay Or on my turn, I'll pay 5 mana to unlock Steaming Sauna. Woo, disenchant effects. Whoops, get lost, you know? And that is going to feel terrible. It is. But sometimes you have to take those chances in Standard. Cut Down is a card that exists. Does that mean you don't play Deep Cavern Bat? No, it does not mean that. You play Deep Cavern Bat. It's a very strong 2-drop, you know? So this is a very strong 5-drop that you don't even have to make your 5-drop. You know, if you have a better thing to play on 5, just do that. Just like Virtue of Persistence, you know? Or not Virtue of Persistence, really, but Virtue of Loyalty. That's a 5-mana one everyone plays. It just sits over there until you're ready to play it. You know, you got better stuff to do. Go ahead and do that. You're still developing your board state. Go ahead and do that, you know? With this, kind of the same thing, you know, just kind of sit over here and chill until you get a free turn to use it. It may never come. You may win the game before then, or it may be the key element in you winning the game because you did have a free turn after you ripped off that Sunfall or whatever it is. So I don't know, dude. I really think there is something to this. Not the best room of the day or the set. That is coming up a little bit later, but this is a pretty good looking Magic card to me. Seriously, I'm going to try it. Next is Scorching Dragonfire, a reprint, 2 mana, 1 and a red for an instant that deals 3 damage to a creature or a planeswalker. If that creature or planeswalker is going to die, you exile it instead. Classic. Just delicious removal. Has seen play in Standard before and very easily could this time around. Because exile is very good. Instant speed is very good. Yeah, you don't get to play Lightning Strike. You're probably not playing a Braid if you're playing this, unless you're playing some sort of like 2-2 split or something like that. But exile is important. It is very important, and it has pushed this card into playability at least once before. Apart from that is Seize from Slumber. This is 5 mana, 4 and a white for an instant that costs 3 less to cast if it targets a tapped creature. Destroy target creature. 2 mana instant speed, destroy tapped creature. Cool. You don't want to pay 5 for it, but I actually think that, you know, 7 times out of 100 or something like some number like that, you know, you will pay the full mana cost for this because it's sitting in your hand. Your opponent plays, you know, a big creature or something like a 4, 5, 6 mana creature, and you just you have the mana to play it. You know what I'm saying? So you just play it on their untapped guy. But for the most part, 2 mana to blow up any creature unconditionally, except for the tapped, obviously, is actually kind of playable, but I'm not sure that it is going to get there, what would get lost in the format, and some other, you know, 1 mana options even that may be potentially better than this. So I'll have to wait and see, but I do think there's some potential there. Next is Sheltered by Ghost, another removal spell. This one kind of targets your own guys in a roundabout way. 2 mana, 1 and a white for an aura that enchants a creature you control. When Sheltered by Ghosts enters, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Sheltered by Ghosts leaves the battlefield. Enchanted creature has +1/+0 and has lifelink and ward 2. My goodness. So, like, the downside to this is that you have to have a creature to put it on. They have to have something that you want to target with it, which shouldn't be too hard, right? But you also, after you pass those checks, you have to resolve it without the creature that you're targeting on your side of the table dying. Getting blown out, you know? So there's a few checks you have to pass, I'll acknowledge, before this card hits the table and starts being good. But once it does hit the table, it also dies to like temporary lockdown. Like there are reasons why the card is not great and may not see play. But I got other reasons why I do like the card. You know, I've been talking a good bit about a Boros Slick Shot deck. We just saw a 1 mana protect your guy and give him +1/+1. It's an aura, you know, in white. I think that might be really good for the, you know, potential Boros Slick Shot deck. This is pretty good too, right? Because if your opponent has something that can block or otherwise threaten your board state, right? Threaten your win, then you can throw this on, say, your Slick Shot and take out their non-land permanent that's threatening you in some way or another. And your Slick Shot gets that turn, what, +3/+0 in lifelink? Seems good, man. Even just the lifelink on a Slick Shot, an Emberheart Challenger, Heartfire Hero, Monastery Swiftspear, just any of your sort of, you know, iconic creatures, like the traditional creatures that deck plays. This card on any of those looks pretty good. It really does. You play it on a Swiftspear, go away, Antivirus. I swear. It doesn't want to. It doesn't want to. But yeah, I swear that if you play this on, you know, just a Monastery Swiftspear, then what is that? He swings for, she swings for 3 lifelink that turn just because of this card. And then she'll have the ward for the rest of the game. Same thing with your Slick Shot, your Challenger or whatever. Having that ward is really important, I think, too. So, I don't know. I kind of like this card, and I think that it has a shot in a very specific deck that doesn't quite exist yet, so who knows if it ever will. But, you know, it's pretty good consideration to make that deck a thing. But next is Shroud Stomper. Cool card. 7 mana, though. 3, 2 white, and 2 black for a 5/5 elemental with Death Touch. When it ETBs or attacks, each opponent loses 2 life. You gain 2 life and draw a card. Neat. Actually, really neat. I mean, 7 mana is too much. But there's a lot of reanimation in the limited environment. And so you need reanimation targets, basically. At the lower rarities. And that's what some of these plane cycling guys are about. That's what a lot of the Manifest Dread stuff is about, is we got to put like big creatures in our yard somehow or another, because there's like 4 reanimation spells in the set. All of them at lower rarities too. So reanimation is going to like definitely be a thing at pre-release and draft and stuff. So this is just an attempt to get a reanimation target into the uncommon slot. And I think they did a pretty good job. It's got a decent ETB trigger. Everyone lose 2 and you gain 2 and draw a card. That's not bad. That's just good old fashioned, like solid magic card right there. And then it's got an attacks trigger too. And they want to like let it through to attack because it's a 5/5 death touch. So like they're going to trade stuff with it. If they do go to block it, at the very least, they may even just like chump block it. And then they have to deal with its attacks trigger every turn. So once it's on the table and once it's attacking and not getting removed or whatever, like I could see it being pretty good. We just have better reanimation targets in standard by and large, but I still kind of want to at least try it. I really do. I mean, you look at things like Atraxa, Vaultborn Tyrant, even, Yawgmoth that's in this set. There are good reanimation targets in standard well beyond this thing. But still, don't you want to try? Don't you? A little bit, But next is Ticket Booth and Tunnel of Hate, not Tunnel of Love, Tunnel of Hate. Ticket Booth is 3 mana, 2 and a red for an enchantment. When you unlock it, Manifest Dread. Tunnel of Hate is 6 mana, 4 and 2 red for an enchantment. Whenever you attack, an attacking creature gains double strike until end of turn. So that's good. Is it good enough? I don't think so. I think 6 mana is a bit much for this, but like I've said before, maybe in Big Red, but I think Big Red even has like better options than this. As tempting as this right side looks, I just think it's priced out. I really do. And the left side, I don't even really want to talk about too much because you are playing Scathed Zombies. You're playing Grey Ogre, a 3 mana 2/2. And like, yeah, you get some extra value because you get Manifest Dread, but you're basically paying 3 mana for a 2/2, and I just think that's bad. Like almost every time you do it. But next is Underwater Tunnel and Slimy Aquarium. Now, Underwater Tunnel is a blue mana for an enchantment. When you unlock it, you surveil 2. Slimy Aquarium is 4 mana, 3 and a blue. When you unlock it, Manifest Dread, put a +1/+1 counter on that guy. This looks pretty weak too. I do like the cheaper rooms by and large, and 1 mana to surveil 2 is like, could be worse. Could be better though. You play Rubble Belt Maverick or whatever it's called. That's 1 mana for a 1/1 ETB, Surveil 2, and it's got a cool little graveyard ability too if you're Insidious Roots deck. This is just a blue for Surveil 2. This is not, Otherworldly Gaze or something like that, right? It's just not that card. And then Slimy Aquarium is, okay, I get a 4 mana 3/3. All right? It's just like, I want to like this more than I do, is I guess what I'm saying here. Violent Urge is a red mana. We reviewed this last night. It's an instant. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains first strike till end of turn. But if you have Delirium, the creature gains a double strike instead of first strike. Wow. Actually, it technically gains both, and not like it matters. But still, double strike is really good for a single mana, especially considering it gives it +1/+0 too. So if you have double strike, that's kind of like +2/+0, right? Kind of phenomenal if you have Delirium, but I'm just not sure that the decks that would obviously want this, again, the slick shot decks, can really make good use of it. I mean, it's just a card that we've seen a million times. If you don't have the Delirium, it's +1/+0 first strike for a mana. We've seen that on a lot of cards that all have different names, and I can't remember a single one of them right now. But it's Swift Strike or something like that. But I think I got it wrong too. I think Swift Strike is actually better than that. I think it's like +2 or 3/+0 in first strike. But anyway, none of that matters. These slick shot decks could play sorceries, right? They do play instants, obviously. They do play creatures. They could play enchantments. They already play Demonic Ruckus, and they could play a copy or two of Case of the Crimson Pulse, or like if it was that important to work in an enchantment, they could probably work in another enchantment or two. They probably could. Plus perhaps lands, if they have lands they can put in the graveyard somehow. Like I could see a deck like that getting Delirium, but what I can't really see is a deck like that trying to win the game by turn 4 at the very, very latest and like some of their mana is spent, some of their tempo is spent, some of their precious time is spent attempting to get Delirium and thus making suboptimal plays in the meantime. You know, I think that if it comes down to it, Slickshot deck would rather just win the game on turn 3 and play the new red ley line and just go at it than like attempt on the list of all the things they have to, like, you know, all the ducks they have to get in a row by turn 3 or 4 to pull off a win. I don't think they want to add something as complicated and intricate as get Delirium to that list when it comes to deck building or actually, you know, gameplay. So this is kind of a tough call. I do think the card is fairly strong, but I'm just not seeing how the decks that can make the best use of it actually do so, right? So we'll see. We'll see, but I do have a feeling about it, but we'll see. Next and finally is Walk-in Closet and Forgotten Cellar. This is phenomenal. 3 mana, 2 and a green on the left-hand side for the Walk-in Closet. You may play lands from your graveyard. That's Crucible of Worlds. It's just literally Crucible of Worlds. Forgotten Cellar is another card you may be familiar with. 5 mana, 3 and 2 green for an enchantment. When you unlock this door, you may cast spells from your graveyard this turn. And if a card would be put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn, exile it instead. This is a Yawgmoth's Will. It's a Yawgmoth's Will. It costs 5 mana, which is a lot. So I guess theoretically you won't have a whole lot of mana left after you unlock this to actually Yawgmoth's Will stuff is the idea. But I think that's bumpkiss, and I think you should still have plenty of mana if you're playing your deck correctly. First of all, this allows you to play lands from your graveyard. So if you're playing any of the things that allow you to play multiple lands in a turn, perhaps, then this is pretty good with that. But it just makes sure you always hit your drops. If you have a Fabled Passage, you're basically always going to hit your drops. That's good. Demolition Field. Hit that every single turn, and it's pretty good to have this in the same format as Demo Field. And Blast Zone, for that matter, the sweeper land that we have in Standard. This can bring that back over and over. So it's just cool to have a Crucible effect in Standard at all. But obviously with Fabled Passage and Terramorphic Expanse, Evolving Wilds, and the card that's strictly better than either Terramorphic Expanse or Evolving Wilds that just got printed in Murders of Karlov Manor. I completely forgot the name of the card, but there is one. This works with all of those pretty well if you have enough basics in your deck. So you'll get your drops. But apart from that, green is the color of ramp. So you're getting land ramp. You might have creature ramp out. You know, there's various ways of getting treasure tokens in this, you know, format that may not even be green, but there are various ways of getting treasure tokens. There's lots of ways to ramp, period. Back to green, though, I should point this out. You remember the Green Virtue? Green Virtue is incredible, man. It's just a single green mana on the one side to, like, return a permanent from your graveyard to the top of your library or something like that. But the, I think, 7 mana half of it, the Virtue half, the Adventure mode, is whenever you tap a basic for mana, you get 3 times that amount of mana. I think these cards could go really well together. I do. I think if you somehow cheat the red Virtue or the green Virtue out, and there are multiple ways of doing it, if you cheat that card out, then unlock Forgotten Cellar, you've got all of the mana you need. You have all the mana you need. And not to mention that it's somewhat routine for, you know, certain control decks to get to 9 or 10 or 11 mana right now when the game goes extra long. So again, I think I could definitely see a deck like taking advantage of a card like this to great effect. Whether you're just kind of a mid-range deck that's waiting until the late game, you play like a couple copies of this. You wait till the late game and then you can play your Sheldrids or your other like 3 and 4 drop creatures out of the yard and go off like that. Or maybe you have some kind of gimmicky trick to where you can replay, you know, some kind of ridiculous 7 mana instant or something like that. Breach the Multiverse out of your yard, right? So that could be good, like late game value as well. I just really think this card is something very special. And I've seen some people bagging on it. Obviously, both modes are sorcery speed. Obviously, that is almost twice as expensive as Yawgmoth's Will in a format where we don't have Dark Ritual. Sure, but we do have ramp. Sure, but we do have ramp. Walk-in Closet is kind of good enough by itself to see some amount of play in some deck or another. It's obviously good too with like Iridescent Vine Lasher and other landfall effects like Bristly Bill, right? So altogether good, man. I could see this in like an Ancient Cornucopia deck, for instance. I said this on stream last night, but Ancient Cornucopia works somewhat well with this because it ramps you into Forgotten Cellar, gains you some life to where you can get into position. You can actually stay in the game long enough, get into position to make Forgotten Cellar a decent card. This also kind of works pretty well in the Doppelgang decks, which are already kind of a thing in Standard, and are just looking for good cards at this point. And I think this is a pretty good pull for those particular decks. I really do, because in this case, you know, you can Doppelgang a bunch of lands like you do to get like 15 lands like those decks do, And then when you Forgotten Cellar, you can just use your Forgotten Cellar to recast your Doppelgang, which is the thing you wanted to do anyway, right? So just for recasting Doppelgangs out of the yard, I think this card's pretty decent. So I don't know, man. I like a lot of things about this, and I think it's one of the better cards in the entire set. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. There's something about this. It's not even just one of those, there's something about it. It's the fact that the pretty obvious things about it are freaking Crucible of Worlds stable to freaking Yawgmoth's Will. Oh my God, why does the card exist? So, yeah, man, this is a good card. Not only the best card of the day by leaps and bounds, but again, man, I think it's one of the best cards we've seen all season, and the last card we'll look at all season, and I think there's something poetic about that. But anyway, tomorrow I'm going to be uploading that. We did it on Twitch last night, still haven't uploaded it. Tomorrow I'm going to be uploading the almost full set speed run. Took me long enough. This was the longest speed run we've ever done. And apparently I missed like 8 cards. It's like 4.5 hours or more. It's a ridiculously long speed run. Have fun with that. But then Sunday or Monday, we're going to be doing the top 10 sleepers in the set. Soon after that, the top 50 cards in the set. I'm getting together with Power Dragon early next week to do the overrated and underrated lists. I know how much you guys like that. So a bunch of content coming up. Make sure you sub to the sandwich. Make the like button to make sure YouTube knows that you enjoy the content. Maybe share it around with a few people. That helps. I'll ask you to do that more with the sleeper video in the top 50. But in any case, that's about all I got for not just this video, but spoiler season. I already said this yesterday, so I won't belabor the point, but a really, really awesome spoiler season, and that is because of you guys. I really appreciate it. Head over to the Patreon if you want this channel to continue being a YouTube channel. And yeah, I guess that's about it, guys. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.